there that are happening. Should you have a question at any point, please do just raise your hand, and at that moment in time, Natalie will probably see your name, and you can ask that question. Be it may well be that you have to take off your microphone so that can be heard, but there's no need to obviously show your video. But thank you for coming. Today's session is all about just preparing you as parents to understand what is going to be discussed with the children next week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, the year 6 have got an hour-and-a-half session with Natalie every day. Natalie will introduce her to yourselves in a second, but she is brilliant at relating to children. She's been working in our 2-3 years now.
Oh, you froze on mine.
Yeah, Natalie's.
Everyone else's.
Yeah, Natalie's been working with us with mainly secondary so far, but the options Chichester have just branched out in the last year to primary, and we wanted to include our year 6s in that as well. So Natalie, I'm going to pass over to you. Yeah, do lead us through the next few days next week. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Yes, so I'll go through a few different things as we go. As Rob said, if there's anything you would like to know as we go along, feel free to click on that react and put your hand up, and we can talk through the questions then, or wait till the end. It's entirely up to you. So let's hope this all works. Right, so yes, as Rob said, I'm Natalie. So I am a qualified teacher. I specialise specifically in RSE and now trained in primary RSE as well. And these are the things we're going to be going through today. So one of the things I like to get people to do is reflect on their own RSE. So we'll have a chat about that. We'll talk about the changes in RSE, why it's important, what the Department for Education say about it, what I do and how I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to break down each of the 5 sessions and give you just a really small example of how we go about doing that. And then talk through how you could support your child at home on their RSE journey. And then, as I've said, an opportunity to ask questions then if you want to, or as I said, you can ask throughout. So time to reflect quickly on what you were taught at primary in RSE. Is there anything you can think about relationships and sex education that you were taught? Sometimes parents are happy to unmute themselves and share that with the group. If you are, great.
I can say that I don't think we were taught anything at primary back in my day, but then that could be an age thing.
I think it's quite common, isn't it? I'm not that old, I like to think, although my children don't agree with that sometimes. But mine was very, very basic. So I remember in year 6, they put an odd video on that taught us about the biology of the baby inside. Very, very brief video. And then in year 7, girls went off and learnt about periods, and boys went off and learnt how to put a condom on a banana. And that is my only experience of RSE through primary and secondary. So if you've said yours is very basic and, some might be none, I like to think that we're doing more for our children and hoping they're going to become more rounded in their relationships and sex education than we were, and more aware. So the RSE curriculum is one that has changed dramatically in the last few years. The reason being, in 2013, Ofsted published a report that was called Not Yet Good Enough, and that found that 40% of schools and their personal, social and health education was deemed inadequate or that it required improvement. So it took all the time until 2020 for the Department of Education to pass a new policy for RSE. So the world looks like a very, very different place to it did when we were children. I think about this and kind of summarise this in one key fact, which is that policy, the last one, was in 2000 before it was changed in 2020. And that was 5 years before YouTube was even launched. And as we know, there are many things we can learn now from YouTube, some of them great, some of them not so great. It is a great resource, and the internet as a whole, but obviously comes with some really, really heightened risks as well. So the Department for Education are saying that we want to see our children grow up safely and we want them to have effective RSE. And that shows our children are more likely to report abuse if that happens. They're also, the learning themselves equips the children to deal with social and cultural pressures in an appropriate way as they grow. And when we think about RSE, it's important we think about that those things happen right from them being in reception all the way up to year 11. But obviously, as we go along, that develops. So right now we're talking about puberty onwards. But the whole reason we talk about puberty now with years 5 and 6, whereas when I was at secondary, tended to be where we started to talk about it, but they're actually starting to experience changes much younger, young people, compared to when we were of that age. And children that are healthy and happy within their relationships are more likely to thrive at school and in the modern world. So we are a partner with somebody called the Sex Education Forum, an amazing organisation. And what I really love about some of the things they do is they make these polls. They put these surveys on for young people, and it gets us to reflect and see actually where the gaps are within relationships and sex education. And there was one here that I wanted to share with you. So in 2019, they carried out a survey for under 25s. They were educated in England. There were 2,326 of them. And what they found within the survey and that polling is that there was such a huge gap in the term puberty, in what their understanding and what they had learned at different points. And actually 24% of those people, of the females, they did not learn about periods before they had started having periods themselves. 50% of young people did not learn about a wet dream at school, and 38% of male respondents had experienced wet dreams before learning about them. And the way I think about this is any of those changes that are happening to our body can be really scary. They can be concerning and worrying, even if you know they're going to happen. Okay, so even if you're prepared and you're aware that that's a really normal thing for your body to go through, it can still be quite worrying. However, imagine never knowing that that was what was going to happen. You'd be really concerned, you know, you're bleeding, or, you know, somebody that's experienced a wet dream, think they've wet the bed. The shame that could happen to them is something that we want to try and eradicate just by preparing them for what's going to happen. And 92% of them said that, in fact, they think their relationships and sex education could have been improved. So these are a couple of the statements. So children and young people have the right to know what will happen to their bodies to ensure they're prepared for it. So this is something the Department of Education have also, a couple of statements they've released. An effective RSE is about educating, informing rather than promoting. So this is often something that some parents, if they're concerned about RSE, they often think about it like it's promoting that to a child or to a teenager, and that's not the case at all. Okay, there's no promoting, it's informing and hoping that they can make their own decisions about their sexual health and their relationships as they get older as well. Whereas, you know, at the moment with the primary, we're preparing them for the changes that are going to happen to them. So good RSE will help to eradicate the feelings of confusion, as I said, and shame around young people, and what they may experience is being completely natural and a natural body reaction. So I'm not going to read all of this for you, but we're talking about the RSE does not encourage sexual experimentation. As I said, it's about trying to build self-esteem, to build the confidence through primary up to secondary, and ensuring and hoping that inevitably they are going to have fulfilling sexual relationships that are healthy through the time into them becoming adults at the appropriate time for them. So I'm the education manager, as I said earlier. I'm Natalie. I work for Options. Options is a charity that not a lot of people have heard of, and we're based in Chichester. So we deliver interactive and engaging education sessions. And as Rob said earlier, we have predominantly been doing secondary, and we cover a lot with the secondary at Chichester Free School. Not last year, but the year before, we then branched out into primary, which has been amazing, and getting us to see how it's grown throughout has been such a privilege. So our aim for the primary is that we want to help young people to gain the tools they need to help them understand their bodies and prepare them for the changes they'll experience. We hope that our sessions will help them gain the confidence to talk about those changes to enable them to feel safe and secure on their journey to adulthood. And then moving on to our aim for secondary and for college, the aim there is to help young people make informed, responsible decisions at a time that is appropriate for them, with the tools to resist peer pressure, value their self-respect, and gain confidence, helping them to build a firm foundation for adult life. So one of the staff that we went and saw had said the whole class was so engaged throughout the entire session, which is obviously what we want to hear, what we want to see. And 94% of the students within that class had also graded the sessions as great, which is perfect. As I go through, I think a real positive for me when I created the sessions was, in fact, I've got young children. So my daughter is in fact in year 6, not at the free school, but she is the same age as some of your children. And my son was in year 6 at the time when I was creating this and developing it. So he was my guinea pig along with a couple of his friends, because I really wanted them to get the full feel from the very beginning of friendships right up until the reproductive session that I'll go through with you a bit later. So in addition to us being an education project, we're also part of a pregnancy options centre. So we offer free counselling. It's a service for anybody that's experiencing unplanned pregnancy or anybody that's struggling after a pregnancy loss. So obviously that's not something we talk to the primary students about, but it's really important actually as parents you understand, you know, where we are, what we're about, and obviously that helps then for the secondary when we talk to them about the services that are around to help them. So why have external agencies in to deliver RSE, and why not have the class teacher? There's a few different reasons. Teachers are amazing, but they can't specialise in absolutely everything. So having somebody come in and deliver something that they are a specialist in is actually really helpful to the teachers, to parents. It's also, there's so much lack of funding in certain areas within schools, as I'm sure you're aware. And we can deliver the sessions that we have been trained on specifically that is not available to the classroom teachers. I'd like to think that we enrich the RSE in the schools that we deliver in, and we bring particular knowledge and expertise to the classroom, and then hopefully within the RSE that happens during your throughout the schools, we're going to help develop that as well. And some people often say, and this is actually a quote from Rob, I believe, which is that by coming in, we are delivering, obviously this was the secondary, but we are then creating lessons that are more memorable for them. Okay, they're more likely to remember those things because we've come in as an external person. They see that as a specialism. So hopefully they're going to remember that information a lot longer, which would be great. And often we find, especially at primary, is that a lot of the children who may be embarrassed to ask the questions to their classroom teacher, even though actually they're very, very comfortable in every other area with their classroom teacher, they feel a lot more embarrassed asking that classroom teacher because they have to see them every day. Whereas asking somebody like me that's coming in, they find that a lot easier, a lot more comfortable with that, which is great. So I will teach the children with mixed genders. Okay, so there'll be females and males within each group. That's often a question that I get asked because I think historically, many years ago, as I said with mine, we were taught separately. Boys were taught, girls were taught, and you only really learned what was going to happen to your gender. There wasn't a lot of crossovers. But I strongly believe it is really, really important for everybody to know what's happening with everybody's bodies, not just their own, you know, what's happening to their peers' bodies, their siblings, and actually not just for now, but to try and create that sensitive nature as we grow. So there will be an opportunity for smaller groups. What we tend to do is, yes, I teach all of them together, but then there's a session which is primarily, it's all about menstrual well-being and periods. And that is a really, really good point in which I then, after the session's finished, will take the girls off for a chat. Often it's just a few minutes, but they might be questions that they have that are more personal questions that they want to ask directly, which they didn't feel comfortable asking in front of the boys. So that's something, it's the only time that I would separate them, is that the girls can have those questions answered in a more comfortable environment for them. My view is always that we answer the questions the students have as we go. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of hands up. There's a lot of curiosity, which is great. Sometimes it might be that they're asking a question, actually, I'm covering a bit later on or tomorrow, and I'll say to them, you know, what you're saying is really, really important to me. I am going to answer that question tomorrow. Do you think you can hang on to that answer till tomorrow? And often they say yes, which is great. But my aim is to always answer that factually, non-judgmentally. And sometimes parents and staff have also been concerned that actually, what if they ask a question that you deem to not be as appropriate or that other children might not want to hear? Well, actually, the really important thing there is that we cover that and we answer those questions, because if we don't answer them, we're risking them searching it into Google. Okay, we've all done that thing where we type an innocent thing into Google, up comes something, and we're risking them to the exposure of something that is a lot more risky, much more inappropriate. So just by answering those questions really factually, comfortably, it eradicates the need for them to do that, or for them to talk to somebody that maybe is a bit less informed. So this is the breakdown of each of the sessions. So there will be 5 sessions. The first session is about relationships. So we're going to talk about important characteristics, about what makes a good friend, respecting relationships, and also just ones that are different from their own. Okay, so for some people, they might have one dad and one mum, a brother and a sister. For some others, they might have 2 dads or 2 mums, or they might live with birth parents, or some might live with foster parents. And it's just getting them to understand that actually everybody's household doesn't look like theirs, and that's okay. And just because their relationships are different from the ones they experience, it doesn't mean they're any more or less important. So that's the kind of aim for that one. It's also a really good way in for me with the students, because I think if I went in as a stranger and just threw lots of puberty facts at them, I think that would be too much. I try to create that rapport with them first so they feel a bit more comfortable. And then we move on to session 2 and 3, and that is all about puberty. So within that, we talk about the physical changes, we talk about emotional changes, we're talking about the internal and the external reproductive organs and all of their functions. We talk about erections, wet dreams, masturbation, and periods. So when I get to the term masturbation, I can often see, when I can see parents' faces, they're like, but I want to reassure you that is very, very brief, some of the things that we discuss. So that's really important for them to understand. For some people, they have those feelings and it's not shameful, and they shouldn't feel shame if that's how they're feeling. They want to explore their bodies, and that's fine. It's more from a safeguarding point of view. Okay, so I would say things such as, you know, it's normal if you do, normal if you don't. But that's something that's very private to a person. So that's something they would do completely private. And it's something for that person to enjoy just by themselves. So obviously that's the kind of environment we are trying to create with them. So non-shamed, something we can talk about and we can discuss. Doesn't happen to everybody, but definitely something that is private, away from anybody else. Session 4, so that's menstruation and menstrual well-being. So that's all about periods. So what happens during a period, what's normal, and then we look at all the different menstrual products. So I bring all of them along, everybody has a look at them. It's just trying to normalise all that kind of that talk, normalise the products. And actually, that's often my favourite lesson, because there's so many questions that come out of them and so much curiosity. It's amazing. And not just the girls, the boys are equally as inquisitive and curious about it, which is great. And then the final session is about reproduction. So that'll be the Friday session. So there we talk about the journey of the sperm and the egg during conception. So we do talk about IVF and twins as well. We talk about the growth of the baby during pregnancy through to birth. And we use the correct terminology about the functions of the organs as well as we go. So here's an example of one of the pieces of work. So this is about relationships. So once we've spoken about what they think is really important in relationships, they then make a recipe. So it's a cake recipe, I think about it as, but in fact, we're then transferring that to a loving relationship recipe, which is a really lovely exercise for them to do. And this is one of the external reproductive organs. So I'll bring this up on the PowerPoint for them. They then have some cards in which they have to try and work out which term is for which reproductive organ on the screen. And then we talk about what they think they're for, and you know what they're called, the process, when those changes happen, and how that looks different from a female's to a male's. And then we have this amazing resource, which I absolutely love. It's called Ombia. So what it is everybody gets really small handsets. So each child has a handset. Up on the board would come questions just like this, and then they would vote. So it's a multiple choice and it's completely anonymous. So nobody knows what anybody else has written or typed in. We just know how many people have voted. So for example, here, roughly how often will a female menstruate? They'd have this handset that would have A, B, C or D. They click which one they think it is, and then it comes up in a poll and it would let us know. And then obviously we talk about the correct answers, but it makes them feel more comfortable because they don't feel that they're going to look silly if they get it wrong. So then how can you support your child's RSE journey at home? I am aware I'm going through it quite quickly. So if there is any questions, as we said, please feel free to ask. But I'm also aware that this is rush hour in most people's houses and they want to cook dinner or need to cook dinner. So how can you support your child's RSE journey at home? So talk to them, ask them what they've been learning is always a great way in. Some people don't feel comfortable, you know, going straight in and talking to them about it, whereas actually this is a really good way in to just brush around what you think they're learning. And then that's when often the questions come from them. Let them ask questions, let them be curious. And I've always had the view that they're asking questions because they want to know the answer. You need to give them enough of an answer to satisfy their need without overwhelming them. And it's okay if you don't know. Okay, I often say my son's been asking me questions since he was about 4 that I just don't know the answer to. And I say to him, I don't know the answer, but we will find out. Okay, and I'll find out with you and we'll learn that together. Okay, but never lie, never just make it up. But admit that it's okay that you don't know. So talk about the changes that happen to the males and the females, as we said. Don't leave a question unanswered. Because they may seek that answer somewhere else. As I said, they're asking it because they want to know the answer, even if it makes, you know, a parent or a carer feel embarrassed. This is the time that they're going to remember. So all of those impressions are really important. I like to think because I've been open with my children, in a few years' time, they're still going to continue to be open. But we need to try and set that precedent now and ensure that we don't clam up and look like we're angry or annoyed or that we don't want to hear about it. Those are really, really important. I also feel really, really passionate about avoiding a shush culture. So I know when I grew up, many of my friends have had these discussions as well, in which there were certain things as a girl, especially, you didn't talk about in front of your brother or your dad, or everything was shushed when it came to periods. And actually, I don't ever want to have to think that a young person feels like that, because actually, without that period, none of us would be here. It's really, really important they don't feel that way. It's really important they can share their experiences or their feelings, or if somebody's on their period and they need to ask somebody for a sanitary towel, that's fine. It shouldn't be shushed. And actually, schools now have what they call a red box that is available. So if any female thinks, oh my gosh, I've, you know, started my period, or I'm a bit concerned about that, there's a box full of things that they can use, and those products are available to them. As I said, the way we approach that now can impact how they talk to us later. I did say it's okay to admit that you don't know, as long as you find the answer. So these are some useful websites here that you can, you know, have a look through at some point if you feel the need. So Educating Eve is a great one. Outspoken Sex Ed is a perfect one for parents. It's like a troubleshooting. It will put you in situations of the best way to get out of this question. Okay, the best way to cover everything you need to cover and to know it without going, which is great. NHS is also a perfect place to look at, more factually. The Sex Education Forum, perfect. And if there's anything you need to know in terms of online safety, Think You Know is a really good website as well. But if there's any kind of guidelines that people think they need to look at more, gov.uk is really great for the primary school guidance. It is quite lengthy, but there's a table in which it's easier to pick things out rather than reading through pages and pages of guidance. But yeah, I would hugely recommend those ones there. So a friend of mine, I didn't buy these books, but a friend of mine came to me and said, my son, who is now in year 8, she said he just doesn't want to talk about it. I'm trying to approach it, but it's really awkward. I've bought these books. Can you have a look? What do you think? And I had a look through them. Some books I found that you look at and they're either pitched really, really quite babyish, that actually I think it would be quite patronizing for some children that are more able. However, some of them again are pitched too high, whereas these I think are amazing. And I said to Rob earlier, I wish I got commission for recommending these. I don't. They're available on Amazon. So the Boy's Guide to Growing Up and the Girl's Guide to Growing Up, and it's done in chunks. Okay, so there's chapters that can be answered. There's things they can revisit. It might be something you want to read through with your child. It might be something that you leave on their bedside table and they have a look at. But if it's something that you're struggling with or you think would be able to aid your child, they are two really, really great books to have a look through. As I said, it does it in chunks, so it kind of takes it at their pace as to what they're comfortable with, rather than too much of an overload all at once. Right, so that brings me to the end. If anybody's got any questions at all, please feel free to unmute yourself. If there's any questions. Nope. If you do have any questions in the meantime, you know, the end of this week or anything like that, if you can send an email in to Rob, is it okay for them to email you directly, or is it somebody?
Our Angel with 2 L's at chisfreeschool.org.uk. Yeah, I'll pass them on to you.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. It's also something that's worth mentioning is I said about the children asking questions. Some of them feel really comfortable asking questions in groups. Some of them feel comfortable asking in front of the class, but there is opportunities for them to write them down as well. So I can answer those anonymously for those that don't feel comfortable saying that in front of the class. Right. I won't keep you for any longer if there's no other questions. Rob, did you have anything?
Well, just from me, you have actually got a parental right to request to be removed from some aspects of the RSE. So I just need to make that clear to you should you want that. And really, according to the DFE, it should be via Mr. Garner if you are requesting. So just an email to him to request that you would not want your child to participate in the RSE sessions, and a reason normally kind of covers that ability. We as a school think this is absolutely vital. Natalie, thank you very much for the time you've given today and for coming in next week and starting that journey with quite a number of our pupils. I know some of them have studied elements of this already in year 5, and I'm sure conversations have happened at home. But as you said, this is really something for them and memorable through this difficult period ahead. So thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. We shall let you get going. So thank you very much for coming on, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Perfect.
Now I'm trying to stop the recording. Stop recording.
That was the